to speak to you in the name of God who comes to his people and sets them free. Amen. Of all days, this might be a day where we sit with disappointment a little bit. Have you ever been disappointed? Sure. Have you ever felt like the rug of your whole life has been pulled out from under you?
Yes.
There are many ways that we experience disappointment. Maybe you're making plans to move on to a new job, or maybe to start your own business, and a new child makes you think, I don't know that I can lose that health care. Maybe you're planning to make a life change and suddenly you're caring for an aging parent. Maybe you make plans to go to school and you work only to find that you can't manage to support yourself and your family and go to school at the same time and juggle all of those things, and you have to make a hard choice. Sometimes those choices are ones that we make, and we experience a loss. Sometimes those events are things that press in on us and surprise us and disappoint us. For Kelly and I, one of the most disappointing things of our life was a failed adoption. And no matter that everything seemed to line up to make this adoption happen, no matter that it seemed like the hand of God was directing us in that direction, no matter that everything seemed to be experiencing resurrection in our life around that adoption, at the last minute, at the 11th hour, the rug was pulled out from under us. And that felt like a huge, devastating loss. One that we still grieve to this day. Disappointment hangs with you. It doesn't necessarily go away. Death and loss hang with you. They don't necessarily go away. I remember when I worked in a bookstore, one of the most popular books was about grieving, about the stages of grief. Kubler-Ross talking about anxiety, and anger, depression, acceptance, all those stages. And there was this kind of mythology that was built around how we grieve that was, those stages of grief are things that happen in sequential order. But if you have experienced grief yourself, or if you work with people who have, it is not a sequence in any logical way. It is a ball of twine that you feel like you are knotted into. And those threads pull at you in different ways and at different times of your life. That grief stays with you, just like that loss of a loved one, or that loss of a situation, or that loss of your own power and ability maybe stays with you. Disappointment is something that weighs on us. And I think that in this Palm Sunday, it's important to recognize the disappointment that crowd felt when they went in, laying cloaks down in the path of Jesus, cutting off branches of any tree or flower that was nearby and throwing them on the way to welcome the Messiah, the King, the one who would overthrow Rome, the one who is coming to restore the monarchy, the one who is bringing hope alive. And a few days later, he's executed publicly on a hill at the edge of town. That grief probably did not go away very quickly for them. But that turn, that dramatic crushing of expectations was where they were living. It was where they encountered disappointment, where their expectation of what God would do did not match up with the God who was coming into the world. And I think Jesus warned them plenty. He told them again and again and again that if I go to Jerusalem, I'm going to die. And he did say, don't worry, do not be afraid, but that's what's going to happen. And it was so hard, I think, to see him coming down that hill from the Mount of Olives, to see people rushing to the streets, and not to get in there and say, Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. And you get our expectations ratcheted up again, that this is all going to turn out well. And not be able to see, ultimately, how it will. Because those expectations are what are crushed. That expectation that God is going to come in a very certain way and do a very specific thing that we have determined is best for us and for our people. And we have read the scripture and we think that that's the way that God's going to show up. And it doesn't happen the way that we had planned. I think it's also a cue from Jesus when he's kind of riding in on this great celebration on a little donkey. It's like a theater of the absurd, like winning the Tour de France on a tricycle. He's saying, this is not necessarily what you signed up for, what's going to happen. Be prepared. And I'm sure that he's reminding them, that's the way God is. That's the way God does. He upturns our expectations. Jesus does it again and again and again, telling us that God is not the God that necessarily we hold on to, but the God that goes out beyond what we can grasp. God is the thing that is beyond what we can dictate, beyond what we can plan for. In fact, it is God who is the one who is creatively designing and creating this world that we live in and drawing us into a newer life, into a newer hope that looks ultimately like resurrection. But when you're in that disappointment place, you cannot see resurrection. You can only follow and hope and trust that this brokenness will end, that you will one day be healed. And because you've given up the expectation of what God does, you're not exactly sure how in the world that's going to happen. So you hope. And I think that's a word for us at Grace Memorial today. We've been talking about how our common life is kind of changing. Like maybe the 4 squares of a box that are shifting a little bit. It feels a little unsturdy, a little unsteady. But we have to give up our expectation of what we thought God was going to do here and step into a new understanding that we don't know the path forward. And we have to do 2 things at the same time that are difficult. One is we have to sit with that disappointment and with that loss. But that loss is our own loss. Loss of our expectation. Loss of our being able to define how God is going to show up for us this next day. And we also have to step forward in hope that there's something on the other side. That there's something that is giving life to us even now and calling us beyond into a new story, a new path, a new way of being in the world. That is hope. It doesn't mean that the disappointment is gone yet. But it means that we walk forward anyway. It means that we gather together and we hold each other together, even as we face the unknown, even as we face uncertain times, even as we face the loss of the God that maybe we can hold on to and package and put into our pocket and get out when we need it. lose that. But we gain something bigger. Regardless of the size of our faith, regardless of the size of any community, regardless of the size of our prayer times or our Bibles, God is bigger and is creatively drawing new life out of this place, out of our hearts, out of our relationships with one another, even in our disappointment, even in death, even in our loss, even in our fears. God is doing a new